right, welcome everybody to the ATB NFL Live Show. We're back after a couple-week hiatus. Sorry about that. We did want to try to make sure we get a show in today. So joining me is Tony, as usual, and also a guest host this week, and maybe you'll see him more. We'll see. Zach as well is here. How you doing, Zach?
Hey guys, what's going on? Doing fantastic. It's been a crazy week, just with stuff in personal life, and ready for a fantastic week 6 of football action throughout the entire weekend.
That's what we're hoping for, right? The weeks have been very strange so far, the first 5 weeks of the NFL. We've had some, whether it's storylines or players breaking out, and we'll talk about some of them later in our predictions, but definitely nice to be back after missing the past couple weeks. So before we get into everything, there is something we need to start off with talking about, as much as I don't really want to. We're going to start with the Thursday game recap between the Commanders and the Bears. Thursday games, I've never really been a fan of them. Right. Like, I think pretty much if you ask any football fan, other than the people that just will consume any football content that they get, regardless of its quality, will tell you that at the very least, the Thursday games have lacked kind of the buzz and what you expect from an NFL game typically, and never more than this year. So let's kind of dive in this a little bit. Let's start with Tony. What did you think about the Bears Commanders game?
Say, the only people who enjoy those games are the people who will watch any football given to them at any time. Mm-hmm. I am that person, and I still did not enjoy it. It was just a truly miserable experience of a football game, somehow following up probably the worst game I've ever seen last Thursday in Broncos Colts with a real barn burner and a 12-7 Washington Commanders win over the Chicago Bears. I don't really have anything to take away from this game because I don't neither of these teams are relevant this year. It was just a throwaway game. The NFL put the worst game of the week in a primetime slot. I guess the main talking point coming out of it, I think, is there's a growing contingent of people who are saying like Justin Fields just doesn't have it. And I want to push back on that a little bit. I know quarterbacks have been in bad situations before and struggled, and given a second chance, they look better elsewhere. This is a bad situation, a bad O-line, bad receiving group, and I think it's just not going to work in Chicago. But I've still seen enough out of Fields where I'd want to see him have a second shot somewhere else. He missed that bad touchdown in the first half, the tight end kind of sneaking out into the end zone. And that really cost him the game. But the decision on the final play of the game, he hit his first read because he was open and it just didn't work out. People roasting him for not going to David Montgomery on the other side of the field, wide open with 3 guys who are ready to go tackle him. That's all unfounded. Criticize the player, yes, but be aware of the situation. And I don't think it means that he can't be good in the NFL. It's just that it's not going to work out in Chicago.
Yeah, I tend to kind of agree with a lot of that. I'll get more into that, but what do you think, Zach? Anything to add there?
I definitely saw all the fervor about Justin Fields' performance, and like you said, with that play specifically, there was somebody who broke it down on Twitter. Basically, Montgomery was the 5th read. If you thought,
Ben Solak did,
and Ben Solak, that's okay. That's who I thought. I just didn't want to misquote. But yeah, he was the 5th read. There was no reason for him to be looking at Montgomery whatsoever. And by the time he threw that, there was no he wouldn't have even been in his 3rd, let alone his 5th read. Yeah, the problems really with Thursday Night Football lie with the fact that it's a 4-day turnaround, right, from Sunday. And you just physically can't. It's next to impossible to do that. There have been some decent games over the past couple of years that have happened, and I mean, obviously, throw Thanksgiving out entirely because Thanksgiving football is incredible. And that doesn't count. It's completely different.
It is, yeah.
But even then, I mean, I can remember a few years ago when we were rolling into a Thanksgiving game with the Detroit Lions starting David Blau. And I bet that under heavy, and that did not end well for me.
No, that wouldn't have. No.
But yeah, Thursday Night Football is interesting. I'm interested to see what happens with it if the NFL does keep trying to move to push for more games. If they don't get the double buy-in there somehow, or we get to 18, 19, 20 weeks and we still have Thursday Night Football, I'll be very surprised because I do think that there's starting to be some pushback.
Yeah, and I will say too, as far as the game goes, I think a lot of what you guys said is very accurate when it comes to that, especially the Justin Fields conversation. I understand he's not playing well individually. That's not something you're going to hear from me to go oh man, he's played perfect. His team is just that's not what's happening. But and we can see in this, you can go throughout history of the sport, when a quarterback, regardless of their talent level, has this level of supporting cast around him with this coaching that he's been getting so far, especially offensively, it's just not going to happen. Like, it just isn't. It doesn't matter how good they are for the most part. Maybe there's obviously players that could transcend it a little bit, but they're never going to look like this A-grade prospect whenever you have this type of supporting cast. I mean, his receivers were dropping the ball. Darnell Mooney, who we all kind of were hoping would be his go-to guy, has proved that he's a receiver 3 and 2 at best on a good team. Like, that's what he is, and trying to make him a wide receiver 1 is not working. Cole Kmet has been completely silent. You haven't heard anything from him. Like, no one on this offense outside the running backs occasionally and Fields with his legs has accomplished anything. And until they either fundamentally change how they play and lean into the things that he does well right now, or they invest in a receiver, whether through the trade market or maybe next year in free agency, which that's what I'm ultimately hoping is that they're going to do, is they're going to really build this team around him next year, understanding that he still needs a lot of help to really gauge how good he is or isn't. Unless they do that, or until they do that, we're not going to be able to really accurately grade where Fields is at right now. So I think people who are saying they need to draft a quarterback next year and all this other stuff, like, it is too early in this process for them to be doing that, and they need to see what he looks like with a competent, at least, offense around him. So, but moving forward with that, I don't want to even talk about Thursday night games right now. We'll deal with that whenever the next one is up later this week. But moving into one of our biggest topics, really the biggest story in the NFL right now, at least this past week, Matt Rule finally gets the hammer down on him. It was time. We all kind of knew it. I think we all expected him to be the first coach fired this year if someone was going to get fired midseason. It finally happened after a 1-4 start and absolutely no offensive competency whatsoever. We'll go to Zach on this one first. You did write about this for us here at ATB. What are your thoughts on it?
Yes. Like you said, everything coming out of Carolina after the week 5, just Carolina just looked pathetic.
Yeah.
The offense looks anemic. There's just nothing happening, and you have look, I understand Baker Mayfield is not 100%, and who knows what 100% is at this point health-wise for Baker Mayfield. But you do still have Christian McCaffrey. You do still have DJ Moore. You do still have weapons on your offense. You do still have weapons on your defense, which is why you have the entirety of the NFL picking up their phones and being like, hey, how much for this person? How much for this person? And rightfully so, because they are in full rebuild mode. I think what's interesting with the firing is 7-year contracts are interesting. I feel like the NFL needs to look over at the NHL for anything. And baseball, I mean, long-term is complicated. And especially when we're talking about coaching, I think this is the second long-term coaching contract that we've seen really just burn in somebody's face after the Las Vegas Raiders John Gruden situation. So
yeah,
he will definitely he will definitely get a job in college football. And that's what makes this interesting, because he's supposed to make $800,000 a month, but for whatever he makes at the college level, that is going to be a cash to cash credit, like, for them to not pay him off that money. He is great in coaching college, but sometimes you're just not meant to coach in the NFL. I think we've seen it countless times. Look at one of the best, Nick Saban. He went to the NFL. I argue he wasn't even necessarily having a bad time in the NFL, but you know what? It just wasn't working to the way that he wanted it specifically, and he decided to go back to college football, and it's worked out wonders for him.
Obviously, yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting where the Carolina goes from here. I think there's from what everybody's saying, there's a decent chance that interim head coach Steve Wilks has a chance to keep this job, especially after he was somewhat blackballed in the league after his job in Arizona. And I do think that's a very interesting thing to point out, is Steve Wilks is an active member, an active plaintiff of a lawsuit against the NFL right now. And he is the head coach, and he was named the interim head coach of one of these teams. Yeah. I think that's where, like, when you look at some of this stuff, there is credence for the points that were brought up this offseason about the backwards hiring in the NFL, and that some of these places are looking at this and saying, hey, what can we do to make some of these amends? I know, and it's not the greatest opportunity, because where do we see these opportunities pop up? Houston, Carolina, places that are absolutely, but at least somebody like Steve Wilks, who's actively been a head coach before, who's been a defensive coordinator, is getting a shot to prove himself again. Brian Flores, who was in the spotlight, and it was with the Steelers, and the Steelers have a great track record for this, but like at least some of these teams are giving these people the opportunities that they deserve and rightfully like have earned.
Absolutely. So I do want to get Tony's thoughts. Anything you want to add to what Zach kind of said already?
Zach really nailed it with it. I think so. The timing of it, a lot of that comes down to that offset language in the contract. Like it's the expectation is that Matt Rule, by all rights, is still a good program builder, a good college coach. He identifies, finds, just freakish athletic talent, turns it into a good football team. He's going to go to Nebraska or Wisconsin or ASU or anywhere and get a good contract, and that'll cut into the amount of money that David Tepper has to pay. But the larger point of college coaches making the jump to the NFL, there was a really good podcast this Thursday on the Ringer NFL show where Ben Solek joined Nora Princiotti and pitched her the idea of why you should never hire a college head coach to be an NFL head coach. And the main gist of it is that the scope of job is entirely different. It's one thing to be a motivator, program builder at the college level, where you have 150 plus players and you have complete control over everything that happens. You can bring in all that talent. And you know what? If the guy that's starting isn't good, you have 4 or 5 guys you can replace him with. And it's just as easy as that. In the NFL, that's condensed to 53 roster spots. If a guy isn't performing well and he's getting paid $12 million, you can't move on. Like you're stuck in that spot. So all the pieces of college football that make great college head coaches great doesn't really translate to NFL football. It is a different job description. And so I'm in agreement with them. I think that you should be looking at the NFL ranks when you're hiring. And that's why I think DeMeco Ryans would be like the ultimate candidate for the Carolina Panthers head coaching job. They shouldn't have let him get back on the flight to San Francisco. He's just has all the player buy-in, has all the experience in the NFL, has proven that he just can coach the hell out of a defense and a team as a whole. Guys like that, getting them the opportunities, even Steve Wilkes getting another shot. I liked everything you said there. I think he's absolutely deserving of a true shot in this audition, and they should be aware of the roster around him right now in this audition. They shouldn't punish him for the players that are currently there. I think this was the step that was required for Carolina to move forward. Now it's a question of, do they do the right thing, or does David Tepper once again make an aggressive kind of unique move because he thinks he can do the NFL better than everybody else? Or does he just decide to do the right thing and hire a Steve Wilkes or a DeMeco Ryans?
And that's actually one thing, if I could add on real quick about DeMeco Ryan. So it's been something I was listening recently to on a podcast about how we've looked at all these offensive coaches that have come through up over the years and how like they're changing the game. It's next level. This is the people that we want to be your head coach. But what about these defensive people right now that are absolutely shutting down some of the best offenses that we have ever seen in the game? There was a stat about the San Francisco 49ers that they're coming like 7 points under the over, like the under. The unders hit 4 out of 5 games. And they're keeping the opponents like 7 points underneath what they're like point total or something like that. They are stifling. The Dallas Cowboys have been able to stay in games because their defense is stifling. The Rams, even though they're 2-3, have done what they've been able to do this year because their defenses are stifling. This is the age of the defensive coordinator. If you can find a top-notch defensive coordinator who can also build, go for it and do it, because that's your strength right there. If you can stop the offenses and then get somebody else to instill your offense or their offense and get those like wrinkles ironed out, you'll be great.
Yeah, I will say, as far as, because I've always been, especially for the past decade or so, I've always felt like offensive head coaching hires were the correct one to make for most teams, especially if you didn't have an offense built and have an established scheme in place that was working for you already. Now, if your defense is the biggest problem and your offense, is okay, you just need to kind of add some players to it, it's a talent issue, then you could get away with hiring a defensive coach to get the defense where it needs to be. But now, with the way that, like you said, so many of the best coordinators right now are on the defensive side of the football. So much of what's being done is changing the way offenses have to play and it's making defenses much less susceptible to the big games where they give up 30 points, even if they have a really talented unit, because that's what we've seen the past few years. It's really, defense has been hard to replicate week to week as far as consistent play and getting the best out of your guys. Now that that's not been as much of an issue the last couple of years, it does make the defensive coaching hire a little bit more understandable, and I think it does make more sense depending on the team. So obviously that's, going to be based on, can they build the rest of the team out? Can they find the right offensive coordinator to handle the offense so that doesn't become an issue? That's what we'll have to see how that goes, as the next couple of years go by. But I think Ryan's especially, and also, like you said, with Steve Wilks, I think both of them are going to be getting that opportunity, and obviously Wilks is right now. So we'll see how that goes for them. But the next thing I want to go into, we'll actually go with this first here. We're going to talk about the NFC East trio of teams that are either 4-1 or 5-0 in the case of Philly. How real are they? How do we feel about all their chances in an NFC that, again, isn't super strong with the way the AFC improved over the past offseason? So I'll go to Tony this time. What do you think about those three teams? And do you think all three of them are legit? Maybe just one of them, two of them? What's going on there?
Say the Philadelphia Eagles are 100% legit. They have every right to be undefeated. They have excellent coaching on both sides of the ball. They have excellent players down the entire roster. They have young depth. They've just built this incredible roster, and they have assets in the future. It's beautiful to see, just an absolute monument to team building. They are Super Bowl contenders. Absolutely, probably going to come out of the NFC. The Dallas Cowboys, I have been very harsh on. I didn't think they'd be very good this year. They're legit because they're doing what they're doing right now. They're 4-1. They're really dominating teams with no offense at all. Cooper Rush is still not a good quarterback. He is not playing good or quality football at all. What they do have is the best pass rusher in the NFL and a great supporting cast of defensive linemen. And then Trayvon Diggs, who last year I think got a lot of hype because of the interceptions, but wasn't very good. This year he's not getting the interceptions, but he is incredible this year. So their defense is just shutting people down, and their offense is surviving with Cooper Rush. You get Dak back in the building, you get healthier in your receiving core, you get healthier on the offensive line. This team is a playoff contender. I don't think they're strong enough to make it out of the NFC entirely, but they are absolutely a playoff team going to be winning games in January. The New York Giants, feel-good story of the season. I love to see Brian Daboll succeeding. They remind me so much of the 2017 Buffalo Bills when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane took over. They walked into a horrendous cap situation, no true prospect at quarterback, really depleted receiving group, depleted weapons just across the entire roster. They cleaned house, cleaned out cap, and just decided to sustain for a year. Try to build a winning culture, but know ultimately that this is mostly a throwaway year. That team snuck into the playoffs at 9-7 with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. This Giants team is very similar in that they are not trying to win from a front office standpoint. They're not trying to lose, but they're not going all in. They're not making moves that will punish them in the future. They are making smart, level-headed decisions that they know might sacrifice wins this season, but will ultimately set them up for future success and future assets. And they're still winning games because Brian Daboll is making excellent decisions. It's a well-coached team, and you can steal games that way. So do I think they're for real in the sense of competing for a Super Bowl or even winning playoff games? No, probably not. Do I think they can make the playoffs? Absolutely. But ultimately, I think what we should be looking at is this is a beautiful foundation for what they are going to build in the future. And then the Washington Commanders, they're a team as well.
Yeah, they are a football team. That is correct.
Are they?
I mean, this says they're a football team, but if you look at the NFL website, so we'll go with what they have to say about that.
To me, they've sounded like a cash grab, but that's just me.
That's fair. Well, if you're Dan Snyder, absolutely.
Yeah. No, the NFC. So I being in the prime NFC East territory. Granted, it's Commanders territory, but it's still NFC East territory. It comes up quite a bit. And it's been weird because the past couple seasons they haven't been the best. There's been some flirting with maybe. But ever since the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they've the NFC East as a whole has kind of dropped off. But no, Jalen Hurts has answered all of the doubts and all of the questions that have been thrown his way. He is winning games. I would like to see more from the running game. and see more contributions from the running game in Philadelphia, just because I get a little nervous when I see my running backs and tight ends literally like diving on top of my quarterbacks to push them into the end zone, because I can't think that's great for his health long term. Dallas is legit as well, as I said earlier. And I did want to point out earlier when I was talking about all those defenses, I didn't mention the Bills because the Bills have the offense to match their defense, and that was not the case for the rest of the teams I was naming. But no, Dallas has won 4 games with Cooper Rush and has nothing to do with Cooper Rush. If you want to put it on anybody on the offense, it's been CeeDee Lamb, Noah Brown, and Tony Pollard. Zeke is starting to look back to form, so that's been nice to see, and I really hope he does start to get better and back to what he's used to being, because it would be nice to see that back again. And it's unfortunately, with like, we all cover sports and we know what it is. Unfortunately, with the way that the NFL works, that the Cowboys are back, that's fantastic for the NFL and that's fantastic for sports media, and it always generates everything. The Giants, though, like you said, Tony, they are a feel-good story. They are 4-1, but they have a point differential of +10. If we keep this in mind, the Jacksonville Jaguars are 2-3, and they have a point differential of over +30, I believe. They're barely winning games. And what I would attest this to is the fact that they brought normalcy back into the head coaching position, into the coaching staff in general. Brian Daboll was a solid coordinator. Had he had a head coaching position before this? No, just coordinator. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, solid coordinator, was ready for his time for the position. He's come in and done a fantastic job of, just like you said, building a base, building a culture. And these are games that over the past 3 years, with the head coaches and the situations that the Giants have had, the games that they've won, they would absolutely be losing. But with somebody who is actually coaching, I kind of think of it should be what's happening to Detroit, because they have all of the pieces there with Dan Campbell, but for some reason it's just not happening. But the Giants are like what we were expecting would be happening, and I would say what we were expecting in Detroit this year, where they've come out and won a bunch of these games that nobody was expecting. But that might be as good as it gets. You could see the floor just rip underneath from them at any moment.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to echo a little bit about what you guys said so far. And I do want to mention first, because you brought it up, Zach, I owe Jalen Hurts an apology, because for the past couple of years, I have basically said, like, this guy is a placeholder at best. He just isn't a good enough passer of the football to get it done in the NFL level. I think he's a quality player to have as a backup, or as a guy that can run an offense that's built around the run game. And that was what he'd been up to this point. But it seems like, for whatever reason, and I've never seen anybody do it in the way he has, he just gets incrementally better at everything every single year he's played football, since I've seen him as a freshman in Alabama. It's never like this gigantic leap. And even this year, like, you could say it's kind of a gigantic leap, and it kind of is as a passer at this point. But it's just everything gets a little bit better. He gets a little bit more accurate. He gets a little bit smarter as a player. He gets a little bit tougher and stronger as a runner. Like, everything gets a little bit better. And it's all come to a head this year. And I think that if he continues to play like this, not only is he going to be the quarterback for this team for a long time, he's going to be paid very well to be that guy. And you touched on it, Zach. Like, I do want to see the run game, the traditional run game, get a little bit stronger and a little bit more used, because I don't want to see Hurts get beat up, for 15 carries a game. I know he can do it. He has the body type for it.
100% he can.
But I would just rather him use it when he needs to, and not just because he can. Kind of like Josh Allen. Tony, I know we've talked about that. Like, you don't want Josh Allen to be RB1 for your team if you don't need him to be. Like, he can. That's great. It's awesome when you need him to be. Like, if it's a close game and he needs to just take over, that's great. But don't build it as the basis of your run game, like Philly has, and like kind of even the Bills have to some degree. With them, they're as legit as they're going to get. The defense is fantastic. The depth on the offensive line, especially. I wish the entire backup offensive line for the Eagles could probably start for half the teams. It's insane. I don't know how they managed to pull that off, but whatever. Give credit to Howie Roseman. They're for real. I think Dallas should be for real if Dak comes back healthy and the offense can gel to just be like a top half of the league unit. If they can do that, they are legitimately going to be probably a better football team and a better shot at winning playoff games than they had last year. And so then, if I can interject real quick about that, like with Dak and like the offense being well, because we were just saying it with the Eagles, the dynamics for offenses have changed. Yes,
if you have a top 5 quarterback, that's absolutely fantastic. Great for you. Congratulations, you found one. But if you don't, we watch what happened with Miami this offseason for the first 3 weeks of the season. We've watched what happens in these other places. What probably has happened in Philadelphia. They went out and got all of these weapons. They went out and got the offensive line healthy again. If you can surround a good to great quarterback, you don't have to have a fantastic quarterback. If you can surround a good to great quarterback who can limit turnovers and complete the passes when they need to, you're set up. Surround him with all of the offensive weapons that can break the game. We went from last season, Jalen Hurts had Devontae Smith, and now he has Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and it's worked out perfectly. Josh Allen was doing all right. I mean, things were looking a little bit questionable, and then they went out and got him Stephon Diggs, who is separation man number one, and you can put the ball on him. Then they went and found the beautiful addition of Gabe Davis, and I was on that before the season started. Everybody was like, "Who's Gabe Davis? Who's Gabe?" I'm like, I'm only the dude who was hauling in touchdowns all year last year. I don't know why you guys are like not catching on to this. He's going to be a thing.
Oh, I know about Gabe Davis, yeah.
But it's just like you don't need to build with the way that we've understood about building offenses over the past 10 to 15 years. The dynamic is changing to where, like, yes, if you have your Josh Allen, if you have your Patrick Mahomes, if you have your, I hesitate to put him in this category just yet, but you Justin Herbert, you like awesome, great. But if you have your Tua, if you have your Kirk Cousins, if you have your whoever, if you can actually put the players around them for your team to succeed, they might not be like the number. They might have their flaws, but you can get around it and you can win championships. That is definitely a thing that can happen.
Yeah, we've seen in the past, so I definitely don't disagree anything there.
Trent Dilfer is a Super Bowl winner.
Yeah, well, I mean, that 2000 Ravens defense was a little different than probably almost every other one. Yeah. But yeah, I'll give you that one. But what I will say, last thing with the Giants before we move on to our last topic, and we'll get into the games. They're so interesting to me because, and you kind of touched on it, Tony, everything that's allowed them to win so far is purely basically them saying, you know what, we're just going to make better decisions than you late in games. We're going to coach our guys to do everything in their power and put them in the right position to win. They've gotten enough out of Daniel Jones where you can be 4-1 through 5 games. Would have never expected that this year. I can tell you that much. I still think, despite some of the praise he's gotten, I do think he's had some moments and some plays where you can say that's a gritty quarterback that can win you a couple games when you really need him to. He's still not the guy, obviously. I don't think that he's going to be the guy here long term. I think they're going to look for somebody who is a better fit for what Dable wants to do and somebody who's more consistent. But the fact that they've been able to win with him this year and that they're probably going to be able to win at least enough games to be, in worst case scenario, in contention for a wild card spot, that's a huge coaching job. And it might be good enough, honestly, for him to get a vote or two for Coach of the Year if he gets to the playoffs, especially. And if you're the Giants and a Giants fan, you cannot be any happier than that. So definitely happy for them. Our last topic before we get into the games here real quick, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I'll probably focus on it mostly. You'll see why. I do want to drop it off to you guys first, though, and we'll start with Tony. Right now, there's a lot of talk about who the worst team in the NFL is, and one of the teams that is in that conversation, unfortunately, for me especially, is the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. We're sitting at 1-4. We just got absolutely shellacked, blown out. Every word you want to throw out for getting beat by 1 million points by the Bills. What do you think about this team? Are they the worst team in the NFL? And if they're not, how close are they to having that label at this point?
To say. So first of all, sorry for what happened this past Sunday. That sucks. But I think I'm not ready to call them the worst team in the NFL because I still have not lost confidence in Mike Tomlin. I think a lot of what we're seeing this season, and it is a bottom out season, and that's unfortunate as a fan, but there's payoff at the end with the draft pick. But what we're seeing is that Tomlin with culture and just having guys around him who buy into him. And right now, this team is very new. There has been so much turnover over the last 5 years where there's not a lot of players on the roster who had been there for like serious winning seasons. And that just takes time to develop. And luckily, it's all young guys who seem like they could be part of the solution in the future. And so they will continue to buy in. I liked what I saw out of Kenny Pickett, develop him through the rest of the season. It's just, you're going to go through your lumps this season, but I still have not lost confidence in what Tomlin is building. It's just kind of the hardest reset he's had to face in his career. And if at the end of it, you come out of it with Will Anderson and the defense has TJ Watt and Will Anderson, because let's not forget that TJ Watt is injured, and that changes the entire just calculus of everything they do on defense. I think it's a season that's going to suck, but the future is still bright under Mike Tomlin's leadership.
Okay, we'll go to you, Zach, here.
TJ Watt's injured on defense. That changes everything that they're doing, but the defense is still performing, and that's why I'm not too ready to say that. Look, I think everybody gets stuck in looking at wins as a raw thing, and they don't always necessarily tell the story. As I just said, the New York Giants are 4-1, but they have a point differential plus 10, which means all 4 of their games they've won by 1 possession, or they've lost really bad. I forget the game that they lost. What game did they lose?
Dallas, they lost, but it wasn't by a ton. So.
Okay, so exactly. So they've won all these games by razor thin margins. Things can bounce different ways. I do think it's very interesting that Kenny Pickett's major stat line is having 2 rushing touchdowns and 3 interceptions in his first game. I find that hysterical, only because, like, with the hands thing, the man held the rock like nobody's business. But it's just so difficult because, like we said, Mitchell Trubisky was an interesting move, but I didn't really see any of those plays to where, like, you would put him out on the things that made Mitchell Trubisky over the past few years, where you have him rushing the ball and have him as Bomani Jones said, the Jaheim plays, where it's with Josh Allen, it's you get him out to use his athleticism. But that wasn't the way. It obviously wasn't the way to go. It wasn't working. Kenny Pickett's moved the offense better, whether or not we want to talk about 3. Was it 3 or 7 points last week? 3 points. You know, I mean, it is what it is. There's going to be growing pains. He's brand new. I know it's 5-year senior, but there is still the transition from the NCAA to the NFL. But the offense is still look better. I don't necessarily think they're the worst in the league, because, I mean, you have to look at teams like Houston. You have to look at teams like, I mean, I don't necessarily think they're the worst in the team, but Indianapolis is just a weird place, man. Indianapolis is just a weird place. Carolina. I mean, we're talking about, we talked about Carolina earlier. They fired their head coach. I don't think Tomlin is anywhere close to being in that conversation. And which is ironic, because he talk about, like, performance and all this stuff and how teams are doing. You're allowed to have losing seasons. I'm a Dolphins fan. Tony's a Buffalo fan. We can tell you right now, you're allowed to have losing seasons. It's been fantastic that you guys haven't had to deal with it, but it's allowed to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this should be a negative on Mike Tomlin's overall career and his reputation.
So for me, and I'll just take a few minutes. I don't want to waste too much time. I want to make sure we can get to all the games. But so for me right now, I don't think that this is the worst team in the NFL. I think that they are very close, though. And I think the reason for that is 2 main things. One is primarily injuries, right? We talked about TJ Watt being out. Our entire starting secondary, except for Terrell Edmunds, is also out today. And unless you want to count, Arthur Mellette as the occasional starting nickelback, which he's not really even a cover corner. He's just a guy who runs real fast at the line. That's about it. There's nothing here to look at right now defensively without Watt out there and without the starting players in the secondary. This is probably, like, today specifically, the worst defense in the NFL as we stand right now because of the injuries, right?
Yes.
Now, does that mean that they're going to be that way the whole season? No, because Watt will eventually come back. Maybe it will be after the bye week at this point, because why play him right now whenever you don't have much to play for? The secondary will get healthy at some point, and the defense will probably settle into at least an above average unit once everybody's healthy and they can stay healthy. That's great. The second biggest problem that this team currently faces is the fact that they have an offensive coordinator who does not know how to coordinate an offense in any sort of way, shape, or form. He knows how to do 2 things relatively well. He knows how to get guys open on the sidelines a little bit, and he knows how to run right in a straight line. That's about it. Anything else that you ask him to do, he can't do it. And Matt Canada, I was relatively, comfortable with the idea of him being the offensive coordinator when he was elevated last year. I was like, at least he's a guy who knows, especially last year with Ben, like, you didn't want to bring in a whole new guy because Ben's not going to work well with that. And that was a whole other thing. And then we saw how the offense was last year. And I was like, all right, well, maybe he just needs a guy who's athletic, who can come in and do some different things. And no, that's not the problem at all. The problem is the fact that Matt Canada is the coach of this team offensively. And if there's one thing you can say about Mike Tomlin that I will give people, I'll allow them to say, and I won't have any arguments against, is that he has not been able to surround himself with quality coordinators for quite some time at this point. The defense obviously has a big say in it. The guys he has coaching it are good coaches. They just don't think it's working out this year because of some scheme changes and some of the fact that TJ Watt's not there. That's going to put them behind the 8 ball. But offensively, the last time this team had an above-average play caller was either Bruce Arians, if you want to go back that far, or if you want to be really, really, fair and kind of generous, you can go back to I don't even remember his name at this point. The former Chiefs head coach, whatever his name was, I don't even remember right now. That was the last time we've had even above average or close to average offensive play calling. Until that changes, right? Until you get to a point where you can have somebody who can come in and with this new quarterback and these young receivers can figure out the best way to utilize them all at the same time. The offense is going to continue to go backwards, probably more than it goes forwards. And yeah, Pickett looks okay. He looks like a guy who is an NFL quarterback, but he's not going to be able to progress at the rate you want him to in his rookie season with Canada calling the plays. It's just not going to happen. He's going to have to find ways to beat his own offensive coordinator, basically. And that's not a position you want a rookie quarterback to be in. I won't be surprised if this team ends up with the first overall pick. If the defense does not settle in midseason and they can't figure anything out on offense, I won't be surprised if that happens. Now, I don't expect it. I think it's going to be more of like a top 7 to 3 pick, somewhere in that range. But Steelers fans right now, and I've expected this to happen at some point. I wasn't sure if it happened this year because I felt like overall they got a better football team from a talent perspective out there this season than last year. Injuries have affected that, but still, they're still not the team I expected them to be. But this was always going to happen eventually. You can't have 15 consecutive winning seasons and expect it to just keep happening. Like, it just isn't going to happen. And obviously, it's still relatively early in the season. We're about a third of the way through, but this is not going to be a good football team this year. It's just not going to be. And if you're a Steelers fan, just be ready for that. Don't just take it in stride and understand that if things break, next year, we can get an offensive coordinator who actually can call plays. We might be right back in the mix of it within a year or two.
If I can lend an olive branch, everything you've just said is exactly how Virginia Tech fans feel this year.
Oh yeah,
literally to a T is how we feel. I'm not gonna say I'm as down bad on the offensive coordinators and stuff because they're brand new and they need to have an opportunity. But like the staff last year, 100% to a T. And I think that's something that everybody needs to think about is like, even if you get that first round, that first overall pick, run it back again with Tomlin and let's go. What do you mean?
That needs to. What do you mean? That conversation is
15 years.
Listen, people have been trying to get rid of Tomlin since he was hired, so I'm not even going to really worry about that with them. But again, if you want to criticize him for his offensive coordinators and his defensive coordinators at times, that's totally fine. He needs to get better at finding coaches outside of the organization who can come in and add new stuff. Outside of that, I'm not going to hear it right now with them. We'll see how the season goes. But
were you talking about Ken Wisenhunt?
No, I was talking about what's his name? Again, it was the Chiefs head coach. Todd Haley. Todd Haley was the last guy.
Wait, he was the Chiefs head coach a couple years ago?
Yeah, he was back in I think 2010. So
okay. Happened, so that was who was after Arians, and then they had I don't know Fickner, how to say this. Yeah, Fickner. Okay.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about it. He'd be better than Canada too, which that's besides the point. But let's move on. Let's try to get through these games real quick here. I don't want to keep anybody too long before the game starts. So we're gonna move on to, like I said, game predictions. We're gonna start with San Francisco at Atlanta. Not exactly the most fun matchup, probably, if you want to see offensive football be played, but it should be a fun game if you want to watch some defense, especially on San Francisco's side. What do you have for me, Tony, on this game?
The one thing hurting San Francisco's defense this week is injuries. Yes. They lost Emmanuel Mosley for the season. They're down Jimmy Ward, Javon Kinlaw, I think, just went on IR. Yes, Tariq Armstead's out. Nick Bosa's questionable. He's probably not going to play. Samson Ebukam's not going to play. No, he is going to play, but he's banged up. So just a ton of injuries. And I think Atlanta, the way they run the football, can capitalize on a really banged up D line. So I have San Francisco winning 27-23, Atlanta covering. I think there could be some offense, so a surprising amount of offense just because of those injuries, but San Francisco still winning is the better team.
Okay. What do you got for me here, Zach?
Yeah, I was gonna say Atlanta's played every team really, really hard this year. They're another one of those teams in that area where it's like, they know that this season isn't necessarily theirs, but they're not going to punt. They're going to try. San Francisco is probably got one of the best defenses, but that not having everybody's going to hurt them. I've got San Francisco winning 24-20 over Atlanta. I definitely think they give them a big shot.
All right, so I'm going to go 21-17 San Francisco. I do think that the offense for the Atlanta will get hot like early on, but I do think they'll figure things out on defense as the season or as the game goes on. So I do expect it to still be a pretty low scoring game, but I think San Francisco can pull it out even with the injuries there. Moving on to Cincinnati at New Orleans, really interesting game. Kind of a homecoming for a couple star players on Cincinnati a little bit here, going to LSU with Burrow and Chase. So what do you guys have for me in that one? Let's go to Zach this time.
Yeah, so I've got Cincinnati winning 27-14. As of last night, Adam Schefter said Chris Olave is out. So that means that the Saints are going to be without Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Deontay Hardy, which gives them Marquez Callaway and a bunch of practice squad guys. Andy Dalton's going to play Cincinnati for the third year in a row, which is great. And actually something else that just popped across my phone about 10-15 minutes ago, Ian Rappaport's reporting that if Dalton continues to move with the offense and actually do some stuff, he could outplay and end up benching Winston, which should happen. The offense has been so much better with Andy Dalton under it, but Cincinnati's too much. New Orleans plays man defense. Jamar Chase is going to eat it up. It's going to be a long day without any sort of like receiving core for New Orleans.
All right, what do you got for me, Tony?
Style analysis there. I've got Cincinnati winning 20-10. The only reason I don't have Cincinnati scoring more points because there are a large, in addition to the Saints' offensive injuries, they've got a lot on defense. Marshawn Lattimore's out, Peyton Turner's out, Paulson Adebo's questionable, Marcus May is questionable. A lot of injuries there, but the Bengals offense has been pretty darn inefficient just by their own right, just kind of a lot of shooting themselves in the foot, not running creative play concepts. I saw that T. Higgins is going to be active, but if I had to assume, it's probably more of a decoy role. So I think targets will get funneled through Jamar Chase and he'll win, but it's not going to be as high scoring as they should be when going against the defense of these injuries and all that. And then, the Saints offense, just without all those receivers, it's going to be tough to move the ball.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, though, the game is going to be a little bit closer and a little bit more points than expected. And I think it's mostly because of the fact that even with the Saints receivers being out, I expect the Saints to kind of do some fun stuff, some crazy stuff like they did with Hill last week. I expect him to have a big role in today's game as well with the lack of receivers. I have Cincinnati still pulling out 27-24. I think that kind of make it closer in the end of the game, but it's going to be more of like a 27-17 with just kind of a late touchdown type of situation. Moving on to Jacksonville and Indianapolis Part 2. This time, Indy is at home, so they have a chance to actually win, theoretically. We'll see about that. What do you have for me, Tony, this time?
It's absurd that Indianapolis is favored in this game. What have they shown us this season? Like, what have they shown us that makes us think that they're a better team?
It's that home bump, man. It's the home bump.
But
even if it's a home bump, you're missing your two running backs.
I know. God.
Pumped them 26-0 in Jacksonville. So
I know,
going home to Indy, I'm just astonished by what Vegas is doing here. Lay your entire mortgage on Jacksonville. It's just going to be easy. I have them winning 21-14. Their offense has been struggling a little bit of late. I think they're going to funnel targets to Christian Kirk. And the Colts offense just has nothing right now. And they're so injured. They have nothing. They've got nothing. Why are they favored?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna double down on. You said 21-14. You said I'm gonna go 31-17 Jacksonville, because the Jaguars are 7-4 against the Colts since 2017. Granted, they split last year, but nobody will ever forget that collapse at the end of the season last year. The Colts are without Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Like what are we doing? They didn't address the wide receiver group, so Matt Ryan is going to be throwing to Michael Pittman. Okay, cool. The Jaguars are actually pretty decent this year. I'll take the Jaguars wholeheartedly. Take it, go, and cash that pick. If I was in Vegas, that would be making that pick this week. I'm normally one to jinx teams like this, but this spot just seems way too perfect to not hit.
Fair enough. So I do have Jacksonville winning. I do have a closer game, though, and I have a specific reason why. I have 24-20 Jacksonville winning. I think, personally, that it's going to be 24-13. and some weird play on defense by Indianapolis is going to get a touchdown to make it close, and then the offense is going to get a chance to go down the field, and Matt Ryan is going to either be sacked into oblivion by who knows who on the defense, or he's going to throw a pick into probably triple coverage to whoever it is, and the game will be over. That's how I expect that game to end. I think they're going to have a shot, believably or not, to win it and then fail to do so. Moving on to a game that is a little bit more interesting than I think people give it credit for, just because the Jets are an interesting team to start the year. I mean, I already know that I managed to lose them, or my team did, so, whatever. But Jets at Green Bay. What do you have for me, Zach, on this one?
I'm gonna have Green Bay win this game. It's gonna be close, 27-20. As I said, I'm a Dolphins fan, and I watched that game last week. But yes, the Jets scored 40 points. However, they were about to be losing in the fourth quarter or like late in the third. It was very close. It was just a very, very late last 10, 15-minute collapse. The Jets, as surprising as they've been, they still have their issues. And as questionable as the Green Bay offense has been, the Green Bay defense still is keeping them in games and letting Aaron Rodgers figure things out. Zach Wilson he's playing better. He's starting to get some more chemistry with his weapons, but I don't think they're there entirely yet. So Green Bay survives one more week while they continue to figure this out. And really, I mean, at this point, if Aaron Rodgers can't figure out some sort of chemistry between Lazard, Dobbs, and Cobb, I don't know how much you can really hope for this season if you're Green Bay.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Tony?
Slimmer margin of victory. I still Green Bay, but winning 23-21. I think the Jets offense will have some success because Green Bay's defense is excellent, but they're not excellent against play action. And that is the Jets' bread and butter. They run it more than any other team in the league. Zach Wilson is actually pretty good running play action, and their run scheme can take advantage of this Packers defense as well. So I think it's going to be close, low scoring, but I do just give favor to the more experienced, better roster at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah, and I will say I do have Green Bay winning 28-20. I do think that despite the Green Bay defense being very talented, they are being held back by their defensive coordinator. I think Joe Barry is running the most vanilla zone schemes he possibly can, which is not allowing any of these guys to make plays that they could be making. I do think it's going to bite them in the butt as we get later in the season, especially if the offense cannot come around. I obviously expect Rodgers to figure things out better than they have so far, but I really think they're going to need an addition to the receiving core via trade of some kind if they want to actually get off the ground. Whether it's, maybe you can sign OBJ if he's interested in coming there, which that sounds like a pipe dream considering he's actually a good player. The Green Bay does not want good receivers. Remember that. So to me, I think that Green Bay is still the better team. Obviously, you guys talked about that. They have the better roster. They will pull it out at home. But this Jets team is interesting, and I'm curious to see how they kind of finish the year, because if Wilson continues to play better, maybe it won't be this year, but next year we could be talking about a really talented Jets team that has a chance to make the playoffs. So we'll see about them. Moving to a game that I'd rather honestly just forget is happening, but we're just going to roll with it. Tampa Bay at Pittsburgh. Let's go to Tony to start this one.
I'm my host here, but I do think that Pittsburgh makes this a closer game than expected. Their defensive injuries are going to let Tom Brady feast, and so I have Tampa Bay winning 34-28. The 28 there, I was impressed with Kenny Pickett last week. I know the Bills' defense was banged up. I know they were playing in garbage time, which influences defensive scheme and everything. But he was making some good throws. He was hanging in the pocket. He showed some toughness. And you could make a highlight reel out of all of the sideline catches that just one toe went out of bounds. I think those inches, centimeters plays can turn around. And I do think they'll be able to put points on the board potentially in garbage time. But I think it's a little bit closer than people would expect.
Okay. What do you think, Zach?
I have Tampa Bay scoring 33. I don't have Pittsburgh. I have Pittsburgh scoring a touchdown, but it's just 10 points. Look, with all the defensive injuries, Tom Brady finally has all his weapons back. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, everybody outside of Julio Jones, which at this point is that really a weapon anymore. And they got to work it out. I don't know what the long-term overall season arch of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is, but they got to get something figured out, or Tom Brady is going to be asking himself a lot of serious questions in the next coming weeks. They're treading water right now, and I mean, if this game is close, I think that's so much worse for the Buccaneers than it is good for the Steelers.
Yeah, so that's fair. So I was hesitant to give this team even 20 points, but I did ultimately, and I did this on my podcast to do with Still Curtain. I did this earlier in the week. I had 31-20 Tampa Bay. When you consider that was before I knew who was going to be out of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa drops 40 on us, and if they do, I will also not be surprised if we score less than 20 points, because I'm barely willing to give this team 20 points as a prediction, because they've yet to prove to me that they can score 20 points consistently. But considering the fact it's probably going to be a lot of garbage time, and Pickett looked really good last week overall, and you're hoping that you can at least run the ball a little bit better with Harris looking a little bit healthier, I'll give him 20 points, but don't be surprised if that 11-point margin is even higher, kind of like Zach said. Moving on to New England and Cleveland. Sure, yeah, we could talk about it. This is weird. I don't like either of these teams really right now, but whatever. Let's go to Zach on this one.
Yeah, I don't like either of these teams either, and that can be perfectly displayed by my pick. I'm picking Cleveland 24-23. Look, both of these teams do the same thing right now. They're both without their starting quarterback. And I would start to maybe have some questions in New England. Not saying Zappy is better than Mac Jones, but the offense looks better with Zappy in there than Mac Jones. I mean, you have some verticality, and that's something that was severely lacking over the past year. But the bigger thing for me now is that the Patriots, whether or not he is starting or not, I think they actually just put him to out. Damian Harris will not be out there today. That is their lead back, their starting guy. Ramondre Stevenson, from a fantasy perspective, absolutely thrust him in your lineup. That's perfect. He will do the job. But as far as winning the game, these two teams play the exact same game, because you're going to look across the ball, and Cleveland is going to put out Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and they are going to rush the ball down your throat, and you don't have Damian Harris. So that's going to be a problem. It's going to be like a 1 or 2 possession thing. And that's why I literally have it as a 1-point game, but I definitely think Cleveland pulls this one out just with everything that's going on in New England right now. This is the fall from grace in New England this year. It's been happening over the past couple of seasons, but I think this is really going to put the hammer, the nail in the coffin.
Absolutely. All right, go ahead, Tony.
The opposite side of that coin, I have New England winning 24-17, and for a lot of the similar reasons that you laid out for your Cleveland victory, they play a very identical style of football. And if there's anything I can count on, it is Bill Belichick knowing everything about that style of football. He showed it last week against Detroit, the number 1 scoring offense going into the game. They run the style of offense that Bill Belichick knows like the back of his hand, and he shut it down for 0 points. So I think the Patriots defense is going to show out, and their offense is going to be able to do enough because Cleveland's run defense is pretty bad. And so I do think New England wins for those reasons.
Okay, so I have New England losing 27-21 to Cleveland. I think that Cleveland is just the better football team at this current moment. I think Jacoby Brissett has played actually much better than anyone's given him credit for up to this point. I think they're going to be able to make enough plays in the passing game to offset the running game and to make it just that much harder to stop, because they're not going to be able to necessarily key in on the run game the entire time. And honestly, they're do everything that the Patriots do, but better right now, especially offensively. They have a better running attack. They have a better offensive line in terms of play so far. I think that you just give the nod to the team that does what both these teams do, but better right now. So I'll give them that. So we'll try to move things along a little bit quicker here. Just give me a quick rundown on these games. Baltimore at New York Giants. We'll go with Tony here on this one.
Super interesting game because 2 teams. So the Ravens have been really, really good, but they're 3-2, and the Giants have been pretty bad, but they're 4-1. Wink Martindale facing off against his old team. Just a lot of exciting storylines. I have Baltimore winning 26-21. I think that the Giants defense will be able to don't break thing, but ultimately break just because it is Lamar Jackson. He's built to face the blitz. He's just really, really good. And the Giants, the fall starts now.
Yeah, I would say so. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, no, I have Baltimore winning 28-17. I do think that the Giants come back down to earth a bit. Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson with every week. He is completely putting the terms of his stuff or his contract into him, and it's just going to continue to show. But Baltimore's a better team here, so I'm going to give them a win.
Yeah, I have Baltimore 31-24. I think they're just a better football team. I think that they'll make the plays at the end of the game to win. I think the Giants will keep it very close, and that's what they've been able to do. I think their defense has played well enough to give them that much credit, but I'm just going to take the more talented football team at the end of the day. Moving on to Minnesota at Miami. This is just tough for Miami right now. I will say that, guys. Like, it's just kind of hard to look at it and really expect much from them at this current time. Maybe next week starting, we'll see more of what the team can be. But let's go to you, Zach, for this one.
I'm having Minnesota win 27-17. Look, Skylar Thompson is starting. Whether or not Michael McDaniel thinks that a full week of practice is the better way to go for that, I don't know. A lot of other teams have no issues with taking a backup, the technical backup, not the third string, off of a couple days and putting them in. This whole, like I said it before the thing, I'm not gonna go the NFL's out to get the Miami Dolphins. This whole concussion protocol thing is really confusing right now.
It's been a mess, yeah,
and it's a mess. And look, not even with Miami, but with the Saints and Chris Olave. I wrote a piece last night and I was fully prepared for Chris Olave to start because he got a full session of practice and a limited session of practice, and then they take him out. I don't know what to think of it anymore, but look, Teddy's available in a backup role unless they do a Ravens Thursday night game like last year, and all of a sudden he just comes trotting out there like, "Hey guys, I'm here." I 27-17 Minnesota.
Fair enough. All right, go ahead, Tony.
27-20, a lot of the same reasons. They're just, if it were even Teddy Bridgewater, and Teron Armstead is out too, so that hurts. But if it were Teddy Bridgewater, I'd probably pick Miami to win. But it's just they're just so depleted.
Yeah, I'm going to go 31-20 Minnesota. I think that they make it pretty comfortable, and then Miami has a chance to kind of make it closer at the end. But it's just too much to ask Skylar Thompson to beat Minnesota right now with the way they're playing. It's hard. Moving on to Arizona, Seattle, which might actually, outside of a game we'll highlight in a little bit, might be the highest scoring game of the week based on the way that these two defenses are playing and the way these offenses can play. I'm going to go. Let's start with Zach here on this one.
I am going to go Seattle wins this one 24-18.
Okay.
I think that there's a little bit of a regression here. It is an NFC West divisional game, so those are always weird. But I think Seattle gives Arizona one more swift kick before they get DeAndre Hopkins back and try to figure out if they can get things right.
Fair enough. What do you think, Tony?
Scoring game, but I have Seattle winning 37-35. I think both defenses are just not very good. I think the offenses are clicking. I think this is the game that Kyler Murray kind of gets right and really clicks with his offense. Benjamin runs hard. He runs well. He'll fill in for James Conner fine. And then on Seattle's side, that offense has just been humming. I love me some Ken Walker. I think he's going to bust off some long touchdowns. And Geno Smith, MVP campaign. If not comeback player of the year, give him MVP. He's good.
Yeah, so I will say I have Arizona actually winning 35-32. I think it's going to be kind of like a heartbreaking last-second field goal type of thing for Seattle. As much as I don't trust Arizona's defense, Seattle's defense has just really made it hard to expect them to not give up the last points you need to win the game at this point. I will say Geno is legitimately good, and there's been a lot of talk about how good is he really. Go watch some of the throws from last week. It was unbelievable what this man has been doing. I mean, anyone else makes the throws he was making, and it's the first thing you see on ESPN when you turn on the TV. It's the only thing that's on Twitter for a week, and it's just what it is. I mean, I know he's 32. I know he's an older player at this point. I know he has missed a lot of time. He's legit right now, and I don't expect it to go anywhere with the receiving core they have. So
we talked about Steve Wilkes earlier about not getting his shot. Geno Smith is in that same category. Actually getting an actual chance. He got punched in the face. And literally, everybody decided that was it.
Yeah, it's tough for him, but I'm glad that he's back and able to get a chance because he's played so good. So that's been fun. Moving on to Carolina at the Rams here. Oh man, this is going to be probably ugly, guys. Let's go to Tony. What do you think here?
It's going to be ugly football on both sides. It's going to be the Rams winning 21-18. The Rams are just inept right now. They're going to get the win because they are a better roster, but they're not doing well. And the Panthers, they're going to get that little interim coach bump. They're going to show out. The defense is still strong, and maybe PJ Walker knows how to use DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey a little bit better than Baker Mayfield does.
Maybe. Go ahead, Zach.
As much as I want Carolina to get the interim head coach bump, I would normally be all for that if you didn't have the rest of the league calling for your players as well after the firing of your head coach. I do think that's going to be a very big distractor for Carolina, and we have no idea what Carolina team is going to show up. I have the Rams winning 24-13. I think that, they might look, something's got to start to happen with them. Either they're gonna start to win a couple games, or they're gonna fall back in the NFC West, and that's not good. Especially with how surprising Seattle is. There's also reports out from Jake Glazer that Cam Akers will never play another down for the Rams again, and he is actively being traded or looking for a trade.
Shopped,
shopped.
Yeah. I get that. I have 21-14 Rams. I think that the Rams are not a good football team right now, especially offensively. I don't think they could block us at this point, possibly, especially if all three of us kind of created a amalgamation of us and ran at them. But at this point, I'm still going to, like you said, take the more talented roster. The Panthers are going in the opposite direction of what you'd want to see from a team that's as talented as they are on defense. They'll make it close because the Rams just aren't that good, but I don't see them pulling it out. Moving on to, we'll save this next game for our last one here, but let's go Dallas at Philadelphia. Maybe one of the more interesting NFC East games we've seen in several years now, especially considering where these two teams are at. What do you have for me, Tony?
A defensive battle in Sunday Night Football, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's going to be a good defensive battle. It's not.
I like this type of defensive battle. Yeah.
You're winning 17-13 because they got the horses on offense, man. Jalen Hurts playing excellent football. AJ Brown, he hasn't had the touchdown luck, but all the efficiency's been there. Devonta Smith's a monster. Dallas Goedert's a monster. Their offensive line, monsters. Really, really good football team. The Micah Parsons is going to get his. He's going to win some. But ultimately, I give it to the offensive players on Philadelphia.
Fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I actually have this being a bit more high scoring. I have it as 28-20. For Philadelphia, I do think that they'll get some passes up. Look, I mean, I know Trayvon Diggs is playing better, but we've talked about the boomer bust with him. Last year was a lot more interceptions. And Dallas, like I said, Dallas hasn't really played a lot of people. And I think that's evident with the offenses that they've been able to dominate with their defense. The defense is dominating no matter what, but I just, with no added bonus on the offense, with Zeke still struggling. I mean, Tony Pollard's come into himself, but I think that they go down to 4-2. Not a bad thing. You're still well ahead in the NFC East. I do, and given that I think that the Giants are going to lose, you'll be just fine. But I do think that the Philadelphia Eagles keep this train rolling. A little high scoring.
Yeah, I have 24-17 Philly. I think it's going to be a relatively low-scoring game, kind of like Tony said, but I think they pull it out in the end. Maybe it's the last-second touchdown. Maybe Dallas has to try to come back last second, whichever one. I trust Philly way more at this point because I think defensively they're both obviously very, very good. Dallas maybe a little bit ahead of them right now overall, but the offensive firepower is just so different when you look at Philly, so it's hard to really pick against them right now. Denver at Chargers for the Monday night game. Oh, geez, Denver. Okay, so
they really thought Denver was going to be
They thought this game was going to be game of the week outside of maybe Buffalo KC, and oh boy, I'll just be happy if it's fun. So, what do you think, Zach, for this game?
As much as I said that they thought Denver was going to be a lot more, I actually have Denver winning this one 24-23. Okay. Look, Russell, I'm not one to sit here and say Russell Wilson is washed yet. I'm more to put this on inexperience in head coaching and the fact that Nathaniel Hackett has no idea what he's doing right now. It's weird. It looks weird. I don't know what the problem is, but this is also the Los Angeles Chargers, and they don't get a pass either because they do just as weird stuff. So we've got two weird coaching situations here, and even past the coaching, like the Chargers are. They have a whole word. They charger. Like it's literally a whole subset of football things to happen in games. It's going to be a weird game. I think it's a bit. I mean, both teams going over 20 points. Not necessarily crazy for the Chargers, but for Denver, we'll call the presses. But yeah, we talked about Kyler Murray unlocking. My fantasy team would love if both him and Russell Wilson would finally figure out what's going on.
All right, what do you think, Tony?
The Chargers winning 23-13. I don't think I'm going to enjoy watching this football game. As much as I love watching Justin Herbert do the football, he's so hamstrung by his offensive coordinator and play calling that it's not even as good as it should. It's nowhere near as good as it should be. Broncos play a great brand of defense, so they'll kind of limit things there. I think if the Broncos had Javonte Williams, they might be able to take advantage of that poor run defense with the Chargers, but I just don't see Melvin Gordon and Mike Boone and whoever else it is taking advantage. They're going to struggle to put up points because, like Zach said, Nate Hackett, not it. Just not it.
Now, for me, I have 24-21 LA. I do have the Chargers winning, but it's mostly because at this point, I do trust that offense, even with it being hamstrung by some players being out and the offense play calling, much more than I do Denver's offense. And I do think they're going to figure things out a little bit more just because LA's defense is so torn apart right now between injuries and everything else. I just think that they're going to be able to get a couple big drives going and then maybe make it close at the end. But Russell Wilson, legitimately, I know a lot of it isn't necessarily just him being bad, but he has legitimately played poorly in his own right this year. And a lot of it, I really think, has to do with the way that a lot of defenses are choosing to attack the quarterbacks that attack the outside, and that's just playing a ton of cover two, making them try to throw the ball over the middle of the field, making them try to hit hole shots if they can hit things in the middle of the field or down the sideline. And he's never been a guy that's been able to throw the ball over the middle of the field. He still can't. He's doing it more this year than he ever has, but he's one of the worst at doing it. And I think that's really affecting him both from like production standpoint and from a mentality. There's just some throws where you can tell he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's looking at. He has no idea what he's actually trying to hit. And until that changes, I'm not going to be able to really pick them for, any team that I think has a chance of putting up 24 points, which Chargers, I think, can do that. And the last thing we're going to talk about, we're going a little bit late here, but I want to talk about this last game. And I know Tony definitely wants to talk about this last game. Buffalo at KC. Now, the fact I will say this right away, and I want to jump on this. The fact that Buffalo is favored at KC is interesting to me, even though Buffalo's played so well, and the fact that KC obviously still Kansas City. But I do want to get the take from both our Bills fan here with Tony. What do you think here?
Yeah, a lot of sticker shock when you see that Buffalo is favored going into Kansas City. It's Patrick Mahomes' first time being a home underdog, and it's 41 starts. It's unbelievable until you really dig into things and you look at how the Bills have been playing this season. They have, insane offense backed up with an insane defense despite the injuries, and I'll get to the injuries soon enough. But then you look at Kansas City and insane offense that hasn't clicked to the fullest of its potential because of the newness of the receiving group. But then the defense has struggled, and it will struggle because injury conversation here. The Bills finally are out of their injury hell. Micah Hyde lost for the season. That's terrible. It's disgusting. I'm so upset about it. But everybody else, it's a clean sheet now. Jordan Phillips will probably miss with a hamstring, but he's the only player. Then you looked at the Chiefs side of things. They're missing Brian Cook, who has been really good so far this year. They're missing Rashad Fenton, their best corner. Trent McDuffie is not back off of IR. He missed the activation window. They are depleted secondary. And when you look at what Gabriel Davis and Josh Allen did against them in the divisional round last year, and you think about a depleted secondary going up against them, it is just going to be a bloodbath on the back end. And I think the Chiefs will get theirs. I think it's going to be super high scoring. I have Buffalo winning 42-38. It's going to be a barn burner. But I think what it comes down to ultimately is that the defenses are going to get beat single play. And it comes down to what happens when they get a win. Is it just a stop, or is it a turnover? Is it a turnover turned into touchdown? And when you think about it in that lens, I think you have to look at the players on defense, and Buffalo is set up way better to wreak havoc and create those game-changing plays because of the players they have. They can get four-man pressure with any of their guys. They have Von Miller on one side. Oh, you shut him down. You bring help over there because you don't want Andrew Wiley going against Von Miller one-on-one. Boom. You have Greg Rousseau on the other side, who has wrecked a regular season game in Kansas City last year on his own. If you shut down the edges, you have Daquan Jones, who not super household name, but when you look at those charts that say double team rate and pass rush win rate on the y-axis, and you see Aaron Donald up there breaking the model, the next guy in that upper right-hand quadrant is Daquan Jones. He is seeing so many double teams and destroying them on his way to the quarterback. Then you Ed Oliver, who last year was probably our best defensive lineman. I just mentioned him fourth on the list, and he can create havoc on his own. So this defensive line is going to they're going to have to get the four-man pressure that they were able to get last year, and then the back end just has to hold it down. And maybe it's a Jordan Poyer pick. Maybe it's Matt Milano finally stopping Travis Kelce in the end zone. Maybe it's Taron Johnson getting a pick six because he likes to do those. Is somebody on the Bills, I have more confidence in them to make that game-changing play on defense than I do in the Chiefs defensive players to do the same on their end.
All right, fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, as jarring as the -3.5 for Buffalo is, I don't think it's a indictment on Patrick Mahomes or a plus on Josh Allen. It's literally a difference between the Bills have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and the Chiefs don't right now. It's been promising to see that the Chiefs have had a running game this early in the season, and that has really gratefully helped them stay in games a lot longer and win their games, because the past couple seasons, I mean, that was the running joke, is that the Chiefs were just we're going to throw the football. Who cares about running football? And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is here. He's back. He's doing well. And it's been nice to see. However, Buffalo, as much as this pains me, because as we have established, I am a Miami Dolphins fan. Buffalo, there's not many teams that can beat Buffalo. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, we talked about Philadelphia, and I do think that if Philadelphia wins today, that they are the best team in the NFC. If Buffalo beats Kansas City today, I do think you have to make the argument they are the best team in the NFC, or I mean in the AFC, and it is a Buffalo-Philadelphia Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, so I really don't want to add too much, just because I don't want to go too much longer. I want to make sure everybody.
Did I put a score down? 28-24 Buffalo.
You got 28-24. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So for me, it's 38-35 Buffalo, and I have an interesting scenario that I think is going to play out that I would love to play out. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to have one of his FU games where he just goes blow for blow, despite the fact he doesn't have the same defense to fall back on. He doesn't have the same caliber of receivers right now to fall back on. He's just going to have one of those games, right? But I think that they're going to tie the game with about 35-40 seconds left. And Buffalo is going to exercise some demons and go down and get a field goal at the end of the game to win that game, opposed to what happened to them last year in the playoffs.
I thought you were gonna say that they were gonna go to overtime and then they were gonna exchange like possessions, and then Buffalo was gonna kick on the third possession and be we can win this way too.
Right. I would rather see them just get that chance with like 40 seconds and Josh just makes a huge throw to Diggs or whoever, and they get the ball down, clock it.
Gabe Davis,
game-winning field. Yeah, Gabe Davis, either one. Which again, I don't want to hear Gabe Davis's name for a little while, for obvious reasons. Dude had 2 catches on Steelers, and it still was the biggest player of the game, which is upsetting to me. Whatever. But yeah, I think that's how it's going to go, and I think that this week is going to be really fun. We talked about it. I think there's going to be some fun games in here for sure. So if we can let everybody get out of here, definitely thanks for watching. Anybody who's able to tune in this long, and thank you guys for joining me. We'll see you next week.
Hey.